Hi, this is Bob Franke, and I'm making this video to talk a little bit about the history and meaning of a cantata I wrote for Good Friday called Meditations on the Passion. I wrote it mostly in 1980 for the Episcopal Church of St. Andrew in Marblehead, Massachusetts. This is the 40th anniversary of its first performance, and it has been performed nearly every year since then at the church. Well, as I hope you've heard by now, this year's combined performance slash worship slash reunion has been canceled, as well as a reception at the church for the performers, some of whom, like Doug Johnson and Paul Combs, have participated in it from the beginning. Although I'm disappointed in that, it was a pretty easy choice for those of us on the planning committee at the church. It was pretty clear what love required us to do, and love is what the cantata is all about. Clyde Elledge, our rector at the church, suggested that I might offer my own insights into the meaning of the cantata this year, and so here I am sharing from what I optimistically call my office. I have to offer this disclaimer. I am by no means an authority on the belief or practice of the Episcopal Church. All I can offer is my own experience. I was first drawn to the Episcopal Church by the music being offered at a coffee house at the University of Michigan called the Canterbury House, run by the Episcopal Student Ministry. I got to hear Joni Mitchell there on 2 occasions before her first LP came out, and believe me, it was the hippest place on campus. I progressed from listening to making music there for Sunday services. Sometimes the only preacher at the service was the performer from that weekend's coffee house. Although we used the 1928 Book of Common Prayer for communion, the congregation skewed heavily toward students still hung over from Saturday night, sitting at tables and drinking coffee. Church was there to remind us of the holiness of the rest of our lives. Although I was raised Catholic, this approach worked for me and allowed me to make sense of things that had never made sense to me before. If I can point to a conversion experience on my long spiritual journey, it happened there. So when a few years later I found myself in Marblehead, wandered into St. Andrews and saw an altar covered in stuffed animals and presided over by the expected priest and an unexpected gray-haired woman vested as an acolyte, I suspected I'd found a new spiritual home. Turns out I was right. With the help of my former wife, a fellow veteran of the Canterbury House, the vestry and rector, the Smiths, the Mosses, and a few other families, I started my own coffee house on Saturday nights and began to gather a musical community as well. We were the first people in the Boston area to offer a listening room to Stan Rogers, Patty Larkin, and others, both famous and obscure, who went on to distinguished careers in both folk and popular music. I myself was blessed to introduce these two communities, musical and spiritual, to each other. Then the Reverend Ward Gamble offered me a new opportunity, artist in residence. I created a humorous cantata for the Feast of the Epiphany for the choir, and gratefully accepted the gift of a piano arrangement from our organist, Janet Fitch. With its success and with this level of support, I decided to try something more ambitious. Meditations on the Passion was the result. The Passion story is one of the central stories of Christianity, but it's also a human story. It also incorporates one of the central stories of Judaism, which gave me the opportunity of including a song I had written and performed for the Seder of some dear Jewish friends. I figured that my fellow denizens of the 20th century knew enough of sin, betrayal, and alienation that including a few songs I'd written about those things would help bind the ancient stories to the modern imagination. But mostly, the point I wanted to make, the witness I wanted to offer, was of God's radical love and solidarity with us humans. After all, there are no Christians in the Passion story because they hadn't been invented yet, just pagans and Jews who happened to be there at the time. Humans, some of whom loved Jesus, some of whom betrayed him, and most who missed the point entirely. Jesus himself, who was aware of it all and who loved them anyway. At this point, to offer my witness as clearly as possible, I have to invoke the name and memory of my late friend and one of the great teachers of my life, the songwriter and guitarist, Linda Waterfall. Linda introduced me to the Celtic term Anam Cara, and indeed that was the relationship we shared, that of companions in our relationship to God. Linda wrote a joyous song called Love Out of Nowhere, known and loved as she herself was by many. We compared our experiences of God and found much in common, despite the fact that her adult religious tradition had a lot more to do with Hinduism and feminism than it did with Christianity. William James talks about the numinous experience. I have had that experience a few times in my life. In my case, interpreting it with the tools of my tradition, I have experienced it as a direct experience of love out of nowhere. Devoid of religious trappings, overwhelming from someone fully aware of my own sin and failings, and giving me the strength and a reason to struggle to overcome and leave behind at least some of those sins and failings. The Passion story tells me that God and Jesus offered this level of love and solidarity with all his human creatures, becoming one of us and enduring with us every level of human suffering to convince us of God's love. As we enter dark and uncertain times, I'm grateful for the cantata's reminder of this love and for the dear communities of friends that have helped create and recreate this reminder for the last 40 years. May we survive to once again celebrate that love, and if some of us do not, may we die in the hope of the resurrection that to us Christians is the fulfillment of that love and the other half of the story. Thank you for listening.